we have, since this is my temple activity, which I don't have very many of, tonight we're going to dinner with the investment group before that. The investment group, we're meeting at 4:45 at Libby's downtown.
Nice, yeah.
So,
I just had lunch there last week.
yeah.
That's very nice.
Yeah, we haven't been there in a while. I've been to the one in Lakewood Ranch more recently. I haven't been to the one downtown in
Pretty
years.
nice, you know. It's,
Yeah.
it's what you expect.
Well, they got. I think there's 18. I think there's 18 people, and they have a private room that they can get. So.
Is it just a men's group or is it?
No, it's probably half and half. Oh yeah, pretty close.
I don't want to get you to use Zoom.
Okay.
You have to send me some information.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for a few years. I've learned. Well, it recently changed.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Everybody's taking me so seriously. Everybody, please take your seats. Get some cookies and coffee. We're going to get started soon because we have lots to learn. Good morning. Oh, see, they're not paying attention to me anymore. Is it? Okay. So, everybody, welcome. I'm Sarah Weinberg, Chair of Adult Education. For those of you who don't know me, raise your hand. And welcome to Rabbi Shefrin's What? Me Worry? No, we're very pleased to have Rabbi Shefrin present this morning. Before we get to that, I have a few public service announcements. So like everybody that was here on Saturday night, and we saw the wonderful Yiddish Cowboys, this is not my first rodeo up here. I don't think it's your first rodeo in the audience for most of you. So you all join in and help me with these public service announcements. Where are the bathrooms? In the hallway for anybody that's never been here. Where are the emergency exits? Very good. You're doing a good job. We have a gift shop. I don't think anybody was here today to open. Is anybody from the gift shop? Oh, it's open? Oh, okay. Okay, good. Good. And the library has some wonderful books. They always put books on display from our topics, so don't forget to check the library out. And what's on sale, Paula? Everything's for sale and everything's on sale in the gift shop, correct? Everything's on sale. Okay. There are copies of the temple prayer on your tables. Also, everybody, take out your cell phones and show it to your neighbor so your neighbor can check to make sure that you've turned your cell phone off. Because otherwise, if it does go off, Adult Ed has a new policy. Our new policy at Adult Ed is if your cell phone goes off, it's an $18 donation to the rabbi, the presenter's choice. Just saying.
I would like that $18 to go back to adult education.
Okay, everybody, please join me with our temple prayer. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel. Protect the soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. Give them courage, guide them in virtue, and bring them home in peace. Rescue those taken captive by the enemy. Hold them, guard them, and comfort them in their afflictions. In our time of distress, we call upon you. Blessed art you, Adonai, our rock and our redeemer. Thank you. Now sit back and enjoy. Rabbi Shefrin.
Thank you, Sarah. Boker Tov, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for coming to study this morning. I want to give you a little bit of, first of all, welcome. Hi, friends. Did everybody get a chance to meet everyone at their tables? Okay, good. Say hello if you haven't. Hello in the back. Hey, Leslie. Hi, Paula. Friends, I want to give you some background on what we're doing here today and why we're doing here today. And Porf, we're good. I'm set if you want to go, manage facilities as you do. Does everybody know Porf, our facilities manager? Wonderful, Porfirio Cortez. We so appreciate all of your efforts and hard work. Thank you, Porf. This is great. The background. So last summer, as many of you know, I had a few months off on sabbatical, and one of the things that rabbis are encouraged to do besides take naps during sabbatical is to learn and study. So I've been very fortunate that 8 years ago, my mom, Rabbi Mimi, introduced me to one of her students who used to be the rabbi at the conservative congregation in town, Rabbi Michael Werbo. Does everybody remember Rabbi Werbo? Lovely man. And he and I became very friendly, and we started studying together as rabbis have done for generations. And we've continued to study to this day. We meet every week on Zoom, and we've gone through a ton of different texts and different modalities and all kinds of fun stuff and sometimes troubling things. We, about a year ago, started working through a text called Orchot Tzadikim. And as the summer came around, it just circumstantially, he wasn't going to camp right away where he goes every summer. And it was during the first, 6 weeks or so of my sabbatical where he was home in DC at his new congregation. And he said, I've got plenty of time. I said, really? How do you have plenty of time? He said, everybody's away at camp. It's quiet. Let's study 3 times a week. So we really started studying even more in depth. And as we were studying, I was thinking to myself, I want to share some of this with the congregation. And it was a number of things that led to this being the chapter that I wanted to share with you from this text. One is that it's short. So it's possible for you maybe today to get hopefully an overview of the entire chapter. Some of the chapters are very long. This one happened to be very short. 2, as you'll see in a minute, I feel like the topic is something that is resonant for us in today's world, in our lives, in our families, that anyone sort of has a connection to the topic to start. And Ethel, it's really hard to look at you over this serious topic with that Hanukkah menorah on your head. But it's dashing. I like it. Welcome back, Ethel. Absolutely. It is a time of joy and light, for sure. So that's sort of why this came about, was as I was, I had a couple sermons that related to some things I learned or studied, experienced. But this was like, I wanted to give you all a taste of something that I did during sabbatical, which was to do some in-depth, deep text study on a text that I didn't have exposure to in rabbinical school. So there you go. That's why we're here. So with that said, I forgot to put the blessing for Torah study on your source sheets, but it is the standard blessing operating procedure followed by la'asok b'divrei Torah. Please join me if you can. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, God, who makes us holy through the commandments, including the commandment to busy ourselves in words of Torah. So, let's see. How do I do this? How do we just go a little bit? Ooh, it's being so sensitive. My new computer is being so sensitive. There we are. Musar. Has anybody here studied Musar? Alice? Great. This was like the main reason that I wanted to bring this text, was to hopefully like put a little drop of Musar into your lives and have you go, ooh, I'd like to know more about that, Rabbi. So before we even explain what Musar is as a movement, I want to explain where it comes from. So in the book of Proverbs, the opening verse, right? Proverbs, these wonderful maxims, this list of many chapters of life wisdom that we find in the Bible, right? You're familiar with the idea of a proverb. It came from this. So the opening two verses say, Mishle Shlomo ben David, the Proverbs, the words of Solomon, the son of David, both kings of Israel, Melech Yisrael, L'da'at chokhmah umusar, to know wisdom and instruction, musar. Lahavin imre bina, to comprehend the words of understanding. An entire movement of Jewish study, an entire movement of approach to living, an entire movement of how to be better, how to serve God, how to be a good Jew, how to walk in the world with your head held high and your shoulders upright because you're doing the right thing, came from this verse. This verse caught the attention of many a rabbi, and the idea of coming to really know wisdom and instruction, right? The experience of living, and then the teachings of how to do it, and to really comprehend the words of understanding. An entire movement of Jewish practice, which is becoming more and more and more popular, comes from this verse. Musar, the instruction part. So really, the wisdom part comes from our lived experience, and comprehending the words of understanding happens when we apply it. But the instruction part is what this movement is based upon. So I wanted to give you that. Now, how do we do it? What are the instructions? So the instructions in Musar, in the movement, come in basically a form called midah or midot. Midah being the singular and midot. Has anybody heard that word, the midot or the midah? So Alice, how would you define a midah? Beautiful. Precepts of Musar. So the literal translation is a measure. But what it is the application is the precepts of this is the basic understandings. These are the things. And how is the midot broken down into a ton of categories? And each category sort of has its opposite, and they are going to be things that you will understand momentarily. So each measure of character value, of a precept, of an ethical goal, that's what Musar is founded on. So it's actually very structured, considering what its spiritual dive it really is. I'm going to go down a little bit. So this book that we're going to look at one chapter of today, Orchot Tzadikim, is one of the foundational texts of the Musar movement. It is, how do I put it? It is a collection of Jewish ethical teachings. You might think it's like Pirkei Avot, for those of you who've been exposed to Pirkei Avot, but this actually is a different approach because it's organized completely differently. Pirkei Avot is like this rabbi said this rabbi said that. There's lots of things that are said and we record them. But this collection is structured in a much more methodical approach. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book and the collection, and then we're going to just take a quick glance at the table of contents, which isn't showing all of them. Let's see if I can get them all on the screen, because I think it's a fantastic understanding. Here we go. Oh, I'm missing one. Ooh. Good enough. So, things to know about Orchot HaTzadikim. It's probably 600 years old as a collection, but we don't know. The first printing was in Yiddish in 1542. Somewhere in Germany was printed. And in about 40 years later, the first printing came out in Hebrew. So that should give you context of what was happening, right? It first came out in Yiddish, so it was amongst the common folk were speaking it, right? It wasn't in Rabbinic Hebrew. It was in Yiddish in Germany when it was first printed. Who wrote it? We don't know either. So there are some very possible theories that are out there, but we don't know. And that also says a lot, as you'll see. For instance, like the second gate here listed of humility, there is much of the understanding. Lynn is very excited because Lynn likes studying Musar. Hi, Lynn. Thank you for all your help today. One might understand that this book was kept anonymous because the author was trying to practice what is learned in the gate of humility. It's not about me, it's about the teaching, right? What an unbelievably, potentially humble act to not even attribute the authorship to it. There's also, and this is my favorite, and you'll understand why as we look at the male dominance of this language that we're studying. There's also a theory that this was written by a woman, and that because it was written by a woman, she kept herself anonymous as much as she could. And the reasoning is the sort of depth of the spiritual understanding that is encountered in this book. It's thought that like maybe there was a wife who was really brilliant, who was watching her husband and all her husband's friends and going, I'm going to point out all the things that you could be doing better, and compiled it. There's also, for a rabbinic collection, a ton of stuff in this book, this 700-page book, about cooking, which most of the time, maybe laws of kashrut we see in rabbinic writing, but we don't hear stories about cooking. And there's a bunch of them. There's like 17 or 18 of them. And so this has led some scholars to believe that this is possibly a compilation that was put together by a woman. That would be awesome. I hope that they're right, but who knows? We'll never know. So, with that said, what else do I want to tell you? I'm going to give you a brief overview thanks to Wikipedia, because they say it better than I do. Orchot Tzadikim was designed to be a code of ethics, stories, reflections, biblical and rabbinic perspective, and contains maxims. The structure of it, as I mentioned before, is based on these midot. So you'll see here the gate of pride, humility, right, which are sort of, you'll notice, kind of the flip side of one another, right? Someone who is overly prideful is not humble. Someone who is humble is not overly prideful. Shame and arrogance, love and hatred, mercy and cruelty, joy and worry, the chapter we'll look at today, regret and anger, willingness, that says envy, zeal and laziness, magnanimity, it's a big word, miserliness, remembrance and forgetfulness, silence, the gate of falsehood, truth and flattery, slander and repentance, Torah, and the fear of heaven. To really understand the depth of this, one also needs to just sort of grasp the concept of the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara. That within each of us is the good inclination and what one of my rabbis called the not so good inclination, even though most people translate it as the evil inclination, right? That all of us, it's part of the human condition, is that we have two essences inside us, one that is drawn towards doing what is right and one likes to be naughty. Right? That there are things that we do that are not necessarily for the good. That is a part of the human experience. So you see this as the basic structure, right? These are many of the ideas that the Musar movement focuses on, is how can we be, less full of hate? How do we experience more truth in our lives? How do we avoid slander? How do we be more loving, right? And you see those opposites that both have to be addressed and exist in our world. The book itself is filled with tons of work from Maimonides, from Sharei Tshuva, which is a book by Rabbeinu Yonu of Gerona, which is about repentance. Lots of stuff from Bachya, The Duties of the Heart, Chovot HaLevavot, if you know that text at all. It's a compilation of many, many, many things. And one of my favorite moments of it, before I show you some of the maxims that are found in it, just to give you a taste of the book as a whole, we were told by a colleague that we should look at the very end of it first. After we read the introduction, which is really deep, then look at the very end. And the very end, it chastises people, rabbis, learners, who engage in pilpul. Does anybody know the term pilpul in Hebrew? I saw my mom nodding her head. So pilpul is when you sit around arguing over and over and over and over again all day about one word in Torah. But you don't go out and do anything with it. Right? When you're sitting around and you're just over-analyzing everything to the point where you've forgotten to, be kind to your neighbor or give tzedakah. So it's like, I wrote this 700-page volume of wisdom, but don't learn it all in one day. Right? Don't spend too much time on it. You need to go take this out into the world. It's a great thing. So here are some of the maxims. I wanted to show you one other thing before we look at maxims. So you saw this list of the duplicity, right? And the oppositional relationship to some of this. So the first time I really studied Musar, and was really exposed to it, it was a panel discussion where a very Musar-driven rabbi was sitting on a panel with, I think, a Buddhist, I think it was Buddhist, I don't remember, and a Christian clergy. And they were all talking about their most deep spiritual teachings from their tradition. And the gentleman who was teaching about Musar spoke about this, and then the Christian theologian said, that's just the prayer of St. Francis, which many of you know. Do you know this prayer? It is one of the most beloved prayers in Christianity. The father that it's attributed to, the saint that it's attributed to, St. Francis, is who the current Pope named himself after. It's a beautiful prayer, and I just wanted to show it to you because I think it's so resonant with that concept, right? That it asks God to make me a channel of peace, that where there's hatred, let me bring love, that where there's wrong, bring forgiveness, discord, I bring harmony, error, truth, doubt, faith, despair, hope. So this universal concept is broken. I feel like this prayer could be so Jewish, except for the very last line. Where's the very last? The very last line, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Yes, that is true for us with Jewish understanding and belief in the world to come, but that's more of a Jesus saved things. But it is a beautiful prayer, and I loved that he brought this up, because now every time I think about the Musarian approach to living and that twofold thing, I'm like, I go back to this prayer, and I just think it's so beautiful. So I wanted to share it with you if you've never seen it. All right, some maxims from Orchot Tzadikim, so that you get a taste of what it's like. It is evil pride to despise others and to regard one's own opinion as the best, since such an attitude bars progress, while egotism increases bitterness towards others and decreases thine own capability of improvement. Don't be prideful. The election problem? Well, wow, we didn't even wait 7 seconds to get into politics. There's an example from the gate of pride. And they're called gates because they're things that you're supposed to walk through and keep closed, right? You open them at certain times and close them. And it also is to remind us of the gates of heaven. So, kind of. I asked if this is the original self-help book. There have been many texts previous to this in various religious understandings that I think, and probably also just spiritual, not religious understandings as well, that came before this. But this has such a reliance, and one of it's interesting. I'm going to sidetrack for a second because Ike asked a great question. So, I don't think there's any Jewish book that is self-help. At its core, every Jewish book is more God help. So it can't fully be a self-help book, yet it is I would argue that it's one of the greater self-awareness books with charges of action of going and making yourself better. So yes, and slightly a no. But so the self-help section at the bookstore doesn't have tons of Jewish text, I think because of that, right? It's really a God help thing. So from the gate of humility, be just and modest in association with others, and practice humility even toward the members of the household, toward the poor, and toward dependents. The more property you have, the greater humility humility should be, and your honor and beneficence towards mankind. Really deep, thoughtful, but clear instruction of how to be humble in the world. Does this feel like the words of Pirkei Avot for anybody? It's in that same realm, right? Of if not now, then when, right? These sorts of maxims. From forgetfulness, forget not the good qualities that you lack, and note your faults, but forget the good that you've done and the injuries you've received. If only it was so easy. Right? It's fine that they hurt me. I'm going to move on, right? Just forget all of the things that you've done that are good, right? It's the teaching of like, go do something nice for somebody and then don't tell them that you did it. That kind of thing, right? That sort of how to use forgetfulness as an advantage, right? Intentionally forget these things that you've done or that have happened to you. And one more, from the Gate of Silence, which is actually the first one I studied. I studied with Richard Levy, and oof, it was amazing. Abash not him who hath a bodily blemish, or in whose family there is some stain. If one has done evil and repented, name not his deed in his presence, even in jest, nor refer to a quarrel which has been ended, lest the dead embers be rekindled. Just like I often ask people in our congregation, you've been married for 64 years. What's the secret? And every time the husband says, shh, don't say anything. And the wife says, he's right. That sense of how the benefit of silence, what we shouldn't talk about, what we shouldn't point out, is a useful teaching. So there's a taste of Orchot Tzadikim. So things like that come out of it. Now, those are maxims that have been drawn out. Those aren't the stories. Those aren't the sort of biblical references. Those are things just to give you a taste of it so that you can see inside it. I'm going to skip that part. I want to show you some famous worriers to get us in the mood, because this may be the last moment of fun for the day. It's pretty heavy stuff. Remember him? I'm late for a very important date. Well, he's coming later. Ike. This is so sensitive, this mouse. Richard Lewis, his entire comedic thing was based on concern and worry, right? Anybody seen Inside Out 2? That's fear and anxiety. Great films, both 1 and 2, Inside Out, Disney Pixar movies, that they deal with our emotions in a very tangible way. They're great conversation pieces with kids, and the characters are a riot. That's fear and anxiety, who I think could have just put them together and called them worry. Chuck. Constantly worried. And yes, where the name of the session came from. If you see Conrad Wicks, if you know Conrad for like 8 years, he's been saying, Rabbi, you have to give a sermon on Alfred E. Newman's What Me Worry. And I don't think there's a sermon in it, but that's what inspired the title of the session. If you remember, do you remember this character from Mad Magazine, right? All this, the farce that came in Mad Magazine. What, me? Worry? Like, it was so oblivious to the world was Alfred E. Newman. I don't know that he's a useful character, but he's famous for this line. And so we think about the sort of Pollyanna-ish nature of that, all of the farce, all the commentary about politics in the world and social structure that Mad Magazine had in it, and Alfred E. Newman was just da-da-da-da. Yeah. So there it is. What? Me worry? What, me worry? What, me worry? However you want to read it. All right, before we begin our study in earnest, let us try to define these 3 words, because we need to know the distinction before we approach. Who would like to jump in? And yes, some of you have phones and you can Google it. How do we define worry? What is worry in its literal, most basic definitions? Yes. Jody. Fear of what might happen. Excellent. Something bad. Interesting. So fear of what might, and then we've immediately gone to this sort of anxiety about, I don't want to use the word anxiety, but the fear, use your word, of something bad. Yes. Anticipation. How is that different than concern? Nice. Okay. So they're really similar, but one is, to use your phrase, eats at you, and that you said is worry as opposed to concern. But concern, you said you're concerned about something, right? Yeah. But what is the concern? Concern has a better chance of having a good outcome. Interesting. Caring. Concern, I think you're thinking about, like, I have concern for someone else. It sort of brings about a sense of caring that it seems different than I worry about someone else. Okay. So worry has a greater sense of the negative. Does everybody in the back have source sheets, by the way? And hello and welcome. There's a table up here if you want to move up. Let's go and get one folk at it. Yes, Ima. Great. Nice. Concern tends to inspire us to do something about it. Worry makes us stuck. Nice. Debbie? Phyllis? Ooh. I'm going to repeat what she said. So worry, I think is what you're saying, is ruminating. You tend to spin and spin. One of my teachers in rabbinical school said that ruminate is what cows do when they're chewing grass. Yeah, great. Can I rephrase? Concern is short-lived. Worry can last a lifetime. It's great. Any other ones? Yes, Robert. Great. You worry, it's encompassing. I love that. So, some definitions from the interwebs. Worry, fear of an uncertain outcome, troubling, giving way to anxiety or unease, dwelling on troubles that are actual or potential, mental distress or agitation. Also, I didn't know this, worry is tearing at, gnawing on, or dragged around by a dog or other carnivorous animals with its teeth. When a dog chews on a bone, it's called, I had no idea, worrying on a bone. So, chewing on it, ruminating, yes, right? There you go. Concern, recognizing an uncertain future, an uneasy state of blended interest, uncertainty, and apprehension. As you all so articulated, worry is much more worrisome, right? There is a distinction. And what about sorrow? How do we define sorrow? Sorrow in the past? I think you're right. You disagree? Go for it. Yes. So the sorrow is the present, I'm going to agree with both of you. The sorrow is the present experience of sadness for something that has happened, right? Which is different than worry. So, I'm not sure the dictionary agrees with you. But your point is well taken, right? The sadness might be, the sorrow. What is it that you're feeling sorrow of, one might say, as they're sitting by a loved one's bedside as they're dying, right? I'm not sure that it's, that it's, the loss is, there's a past experience with it. In the back, yes. Sorrow is the inability to take action, experience of helplessness. Yes. Oh. Nice. Sorrow can come from worry and concern, but worry and concern don't necessarily lead to sorrow. Is that how you said it? The other way around. Sorrow can't lead to worry. Nice. Yes, Jack. That was a lot to try to repeat, but that was profound. I think you mapped out what I heard Jack do was sort of map out what happens when we are able to identify not necessarily identify the emotion, but what the emotion can bring about in our process as we're dealing with it or responding to it or reacting to it and taking action in some form, right? And that action could be, I'm going to do nothing about it and sit here in my sadness. Or it could be, I'm going to go vote. Yeah, or solution. Yeah, beautiful. Mm-hmm. Great. Lovely. Vicky, and then we're going to move forward. I see you back there. They worry about everything. A worry worries about everything. Yeah. There's a grandiosity, I think, of worry in comparison to concern, which I think in the back. The best and the worst of anything is the anticipation. Was that the phrase your father used? Did I say it right? Yeah. Expectations, absolutely. I like to quote one of my favorite rabbis, Tom Petty, if you remember him, who had that beautiful lyric, "The waiting is the hardest part." There's the anticipation. Beautiful. So I think those are helpful frames. Let us begin. So friends, in front of you are 11 sections, the entire chapter of the 10th gate, which is the gate of worry. We're not going to get through all of it. We'll see what we can get through. We'll jump a couple times. But we're going to look at what I studied with Rabbi Wervo. I want to share it with you. It was fascinating and challenging and inspiring and interesting. And this chapter in particular, I only found one section that was boring. Sometimes there is a lot more that is boring. These are questions that we'll talk about after each section. So who would like to read for us section 1, right at the beginning? You see at the top, Sha'ar ha'asiri, the 10th gate, Shar ha'da'aga. Da'aga is the word for worry. Debbie, yes, please, if you'll read for us section 1. Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Worry is a quality that is bad in most of its manifestations and is shown on one's face as it is written. And he saw them, and behold, their faces were clouded over, sad. And it is also written, why is your face fallen? Seeing you are not sick. And one of the sages said, I find no trace of worry in the faces of the nobler souls.
Thank you. Worry is a quality that is bad in most of its manifestations. Not all, but most. And it's shown on one's face. Let's talk about that for a moment. Question I had here, what do you see in someone else's face or body language when they worry? What does it look like on you? Let's take a moment at our tables. Let's talk to each other just for like 2 or 3 minutes. When you look at someone and you say, they look worried, what do you see? And how do you understand what you might look like if you're worried? How might somebody else see you? Let's stay at our tables in small groups. Lynn? Can you turn the lights back up?
Back up?
Yeah.
All the way?
Most of the way. It's just dark and they're reading. So I'm less concerned about the screen. Thank you so much.
We've decided we're one and the same. We both wear our emotions on our face. And what Ethel said is like, you never know what that looks like. And how other people see that, because you can never see it in yourself.
My wife says that when I'm mad, I have a big smile. Like, you look at me and you're like, I can see you're forcing it. Yeah. I think I'm just being quiet. You're clearly.
I told Sarah Dick said I could never play poker because my face is an open book. What does that mean?
What does it look like? Is there like the worry? Is there a color to it? What does your body do? Your hands doing?
I think it's all in the eyes. You can really just see it, like dark. They're sort of like looking into your soul, so that's why you can't hide that.
Let's take one more minute, friends.
My mom was a warrior. And
I think it's a Jewish DNA mother.
when her second husband died, she would call every morning, and I couldn't start the day off with listening to her complain. So I would pass it to Dick. So he would always, when the phone would ring at 7 o'clock, he would answer the phone. She just
Your mom cooked the mushrooms.
Okay, friends, let us come back together. Let's take who's willing. Let's hear 3 comments. Something that you learned, something that you noticed, something you saw, something physical. What you got? Somebody share something with the group. Yes, Vicky. Nice. Restlessness, pacing the shaking feet. Great. So I think what's so interesting about that is I love that this chapter starts out totally physical. Right? You see it in someone else's face. Earlier, Rabbi Weber and I had studied the chapter on shame, which was 80% of it was about a face turning red and a face turning white. Right? When the blood leaves and the blood comes and the anger and it was fascinating because it was such a physical experience on the outside of the shame that was being felt inside. Interesting. Yes, Ike, what else you got? Right. The safer you feel, the more expressive you're likely to be. The less comfortable or known your surroundings are, you might be more guarded in your actual, even though the feeling might be 100% the same, the outward expression changes. Nice. Oh, Judith, we're worried about you. Who else has one more comment? What else did you learn? All right, I'll share. Oh, yes, Roz. Yeah? Can you? in a group of total strangers, there's 10 people, and one of them's worried. Can you tell who it is? Great. Poker face. That's what we were talking about. Ethel's not allowed to play poker, her husband used to say, because she has no poker face. We were talking about how it's really hard to see it on ourselves. Like we don't, I don't usually stand in front of a mirror going, what does it look like when I'm worried? But Shayna sure knows, right? And Sarah beautifully said, I think it's all in the eyes. That like you can often see it in someone, like that fear or that concern or worry, like you can really see it on somebody. These are great comments. But I think what's just striking to note is that all of these, the midot, the measures of a person's, virtues and ethical approach, he, she, they, the author, constantly brings forth the physical manifestation of it. Because if we're walking in the world, I think, it's really about how others are viewing us too, which is an important thing to note. So, we have 3 examples here in this first section, right? First, we see from the book of Genesis, he saw them, and behold, their faces were clouded over, or sad. Anybody wild guess Genesis chapter 40, what's happening, what that story is? It's in this week's Parsha. Coincidentally, it's in this week's Torah portion. Joseph sees in the cupbearer and the baker when he's in jail, they wake up from their dreams. Right? Do you remember that? And Joseph interprets the dreams. The cupbearer is going to be restored to his seat. That he dreams about vines of grapes, and he's going to get his job back with Pharaoh as the wine pourer. And the baker has a dream about the birds eating the bread, and he loses his job. So what's the look on their face? This is his first example of how we see worry. He sees their faces worrying. And it's also written, why is your face fallen, seeing that you're not sick? Did anybody think about that in your conversations? When you look at someone, does it look like they're sick when they're worried? Is it a spiritual sickness? What is it actually a manifestation of? And the third one, the sages say, I find no trace of worry in the faces of nobler souls, of the ones who are elionot, the ones who are very elevated. You don't like that, someone said. Tell us more. Oh, I think it's the opposite. I don't think it's not worrying makes you noble. I think that being noble makes you not worry, which I also struggle with. But, yes. Yeah. Interesting. Right. I'm not sure that person is a nobler soul, right? So just to recap, in case you didn't hear it, there was this another shooting in a school yesterday, and there was an interview with the parents of a surviving child, and her response was, I trust God, my family's safe. I'm not sure that's a nobler soul. I'm actually, I would, right? That's a person who is overly faithful, right? Yes, Ike, and then Larry. Ooh, quantumousness. I like that word. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So a person who is in acceptance, who is present, who is mindful, right, to use Pinchas Geller's word, equanimousness, let's say, isn't affected sort of in one direction or another, that's how you're understanding a nobler soul healer. Maybe, yeah. Larry. Yeah, me too. So I think that's one of the... Right, that sort of acceptance. But, agreed, right? If you were somebody who lived in ultimate acceptance, you might not worry or be so impacted emotionally, physically. But I don't know that that's realistic. So I want to just identify. I see you there. 1 second, Joan. Throughout the text, as I've been studying with Rabbi Werbo, we're constantly noting that the author lives in a sort of bifurcated world of perfection and imperfection, of the rabbinic sages that are pious and perfect, and then the rabbis who are not. The author is constantly of one extreme to another. So what we often notice in our study is that he gives these incredible things for us to chew on, where we always land in the middle. We're never at one direction or another. We're never not worried, or we're never completely taken by worry. Even my own battles with depression, I've never been to the place that I think some of what he's thinking about is, where it's 100% one direction or another. So it's an interesting battle, and I think we go through the same thing as we're studying. We're like, what does that mean? You know, who is this idealized person? Joan, yes. Someone who doesn't express it on the outside. They're able to hold it all in. Fake the front, if you will. Yes, Barbie. If you don't worry at all, you're not prepared. Hope for the worst. Yeah. And that's also concern, right? That's what we were talking about you have, well done. All right, let's move on to section 2. There's, you could spend hours and hours, but I wanted to get as much of the chapter into your neshamas, into your souls as possible. Section 2, who will read for us? It's a long one. Just kidding. Yes, Judith. Thank you, Sarah.
The worry of a person who is concerned with acquiring the material and transitory things of this world is reprehensible and is not found at all in the people who trust in and believe in God. I don't know if I should have read this.
Judith's not sure she should have read it. All right. The worry of a person who is concerned with acquiring the material and transitory things of this world is reprehensible and is not found at all in people who trust in and believe in God. There is no biblical annotation here. Well noted, Ike. Yes. It's a personal editorial, right? And again, it goes back to, I think, what I was just discussing with Larry, that there's an idealized thing here. But also we need to put ourselves in the minds of the rabbis of old and of this approach to the world of like, what is the ideal that we're seeking or straying away from as far away as possible, right? Yes, Brad. Yep. Did everybody hear that? The Calvinist approach to the world is that if you are noble, you will be physically rewarded with material, and that will affect everything in life. That you're standing, the way you're seen, the ease with which you get out of bed in the morning is based on your nobility, your acts of righteousness. Lisa. Your daughter is completely committed to Zen Buddhism, deeply committed, okay? By lacking, I'm going to try to summarize, by lacking a relationship with materialism and material objects, it allows her to be in a more spiritually centered place in combination with her Judaism. Nice. Alice? Oh, interesting. You're thinking about noble as like a prince or a princess. They have people who worry for them or about them. That's a nice, yeah, that's a good one. Yes. Great. So right, this sort of ultimate faith. You're seeing this as a dictate towards ultimate faith, and that is 100% correct. And I want to note that, like, when this was written, the assumption is that you're a believer in God, right? The chances of you in the late 1500s coming across this text and being like a, agnostic, pre-enlightenment are rare, right? The people that are encountering this text. So it's a good point. Yes, Ellen. Yeah. Both sides of the equation are broad generalizations. So can you identify what both sides of the equation are? I'm doing this with my child a lot in his math class. This is happening with Jacob, where we're working on both sides of the equal sign on his first grade math class. But in reality, what are both sides of the equation? How are you understanding it? Nice. Can I repeat that before you continue? The worry of a father who is looking for food because his family doesn't have much, that's a whole different kind of worry than we were talking about, right? That is still, as you said here, acquiring the material, right? That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, what's the other half? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So just beautiful to repeat that bifurcated notion. To call your statement was to call any type of worry reprehensible sort of just goes against human nature. But we were given worry; it's part of our makeup. So how could you call it reprehensible? Yes, Jack. Mm-hmm. Right. The Bible says that if you see someone hurt or an animal hurt, you have to help them. It's an obligation, right? Agreed. I'm not sure what that has to do with this statement, though. Ah, right. Okay. If you're walking down the road and you're like, hey, that person's hurt, that's God's will. Right. Yes. We are part of this, right. Fred, yes, and then I want to share something fun about this verse. Offending. Okay.
Not because I thought they were telling, but because they had to deal with hard times, and because I was concerned about material goods. Does that make me? I find out.
So I will defend the author in one subtlety that I think is different. I don't think he's saying that wanting material things is the problem. I think that speaks to Ellen's point of making sure your child has food, right, at its lowest rung of. But it's the worry. Is that your only focus? Right? I think that's what I think the author is leading towards. So in the interest of time, we could spend hours on this, but I want to share with you one fun thing that Rabbi Werbo and I found. We were looking at this. We were looking at the Hebrew really in depth on number 2, and the phrase right after the hyphen, hu miguneh me'od. As we looked at that word miguneh, what we found was a deep connection. I thought this was a great example that ties in. We found that there's a phrase that the rabbis use during Passover. Who said right? Yeah. This is a good one. So we speak about the Haggadah, and one of the things in it, we talk about matchil bignut, that's the same shoresh, sayem b'shevach. That means that in the Haggadah, what we do is we go from disgrace and we conclude with praise. Right? If you look at the Haggadah, where do we start? In slavery. Where do we end? Hallel, singing praise, freedom. So it was just a really striking connection of trying to understand what is reprehensible. What is that bottom? What is that negativity? That this was the word that he chose, like connected us to our story of that it's not bifurcated, right? That we start in this low place, but we can end in this high place. But it's the journey, right? It's that process is what's actually being driven in the ideas of Musar, is how to refine our character, how to be better and more aware and kinder and quieter and louder when needed, right? It's that. It was just like one word that we like went on this journey with, and we were like, oh, right, like Passover. So when I think about the struggle, I think that Rabbi Werbo and I too, and we both believe in God, that we also had with this phrase, that we found this like nice little touch of the Jewish connection there. So I just want to take a moment. Let's look at number 2. What are some ways that we worry about material and transitory things? Is having no worry at all realistic? And I want to ask this question, and we just take 15 seconds to just think about it on our own. How can our faith or spiritual practice impact this ideal? We'll take 2 comments. Robert? So are you saying that gratitude is sort of, I don't want to say an antidote to worry, but a way of replacing the worry? Right. Yeah. So just to take Robert's thoughts about sort of comparing to others, that the ultimate comparison should be how close am I to God. That's what I think he's saying. Yeah, Alice, and then we'll move on. Hmm. Nice. Beautiful. Yeah. In short, if we're so wrapped up in ourselves that we're worrying, that one way out of it is not just having faith or having spirituality, but acting them, practicing them. That if you're thinking only about yourself and what's wrong, that like go do a mitzvah. Right? If you're somebody who doesn't necessarily believe in God and the faith of that, like go meditate, go appreciate the beach, right? Go do something of a spiritual nature. That doing an action can get you out of that place that has negative impact on maybe on ourselves. Let's read section 3 and see what he says there, or she says, or they say. Who will read for us? Thanks, Annie.
Worry and sorrow erode the heart and are physical ailments. And the worst of all worries is the one wherein he pursues vice, and when he does not attain the gratification of every whim and lust of his heart, he worries and feels anguish. All who worry and grieve over this world are far from Torah, commandments, and prayer. Therefore, one should hasten to correct this flaw and remove this evil trait from his character. There is no need to discuss at length the evil effects of worry, for they are the opposite of all the benefits that come to one who is joyous.
So, before we rip apart this section, I just want to note I left in a lot of the masculine language intentionally. He's talking to men. His relationship with Hebrew, meaning he, the author, she, the author, they, the author, it's very male. And so I left that in intentionally because I want the experience of the text to not be too modern. That was intentional, just letting you know. Worry and sorrow erode the heart and are physical ailments. Agree or disagree? Ooh, it's a mixed multitude. Just like our people. Joni, you disagree, I think. Your self-awareness of your worry causes you to turn to someone else. So it's not a physical ailment. Sometimes, right? So I'll take an agree, and then I'll give my. Do you agree? So we'll talk about worrying as making someone a bad person. Yeah. Right. So I just want to focus on just the first line. The worrow and sorry erode the heart and are physical ailments. We had a disagree. You agree or disagree?
I think it can be physical ailments.
Name one. Name one, Betty Ann. A heart condition. Worrying and sorrow can make your high blood pressure, guys. This was in the 1500s, and they were like, this is causing us. I think they're right. I think he's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So there is, like, if we think about, I'll use a cheesy maxim, right? The body is a temple. And if we're staying in this place, I don't think at any point he's saying, while he's saying it, I don't think he actually means you should never worry. There's nothing to be concerned about. Like, no, because the whole, like, half, you'll see coming forward, like, half this chapter is about repentance. So clearly we've done things wrong and we have things to worry about. But Joni, I think you're right. I think it leads to action. And it makes you a bad person to worry. It's a pretty intense statement, but I agree that that's what he's sort of saying. They're sort of saying, all who worry and grieve, but it's about something specific over this world. What does that mean? All who are right in the middle, all who worry and grieve over this world are far from Torah, commandments, and prayer. What does that mean? Let's actually understand what the author is trying to say to us. Say more over what is now and not over what is to come is correct 100%, but what is... God's authorship of the world, that everything's okay, even though you look around and see troubles in the world. That is a beautiful articulation of how we modern thinkers see that statement. I don't think that's what the author's talking about. I think the author is talking about this world, Olam Hazeh, the world we live in now, and the world to come. The eternal life that lives after, with the times of redemption to come. And that his relationship, look, I think we often think about the relationships that many Christians have with sort of, heaven and hell. While we don't have hell, we do have a heaven, and there is a world to come in our faith tradition. There is a reward for doing sort of right in this world, that we're supposed to not even accept the rewards here, but we'll get them later. That we live rightly now and what is to come. And so I think what he's saying is, like, if you're focused on the things that you see around you as your worries and concerns, it's not that you're wrong. It's that you're disconnected from the instructions that make you a good person. That Torah, mitzvot, and tefillah, that this serving of God, that this following the laws of the Torah, that is what makes you a good person. So if you're worrying about Shmuley up the road who's cheating on his wife, and you're not focused on Torah mitzvot, or one of them, by the way, being to rebuke him for doing that, right? And if you're gossiping about it, or Robert, as you were saying, I have a Subaru, why don't I have a BMW? If you're focused on that, you're focused on the wrong stuff. None of that is going to matter in the world to come. That sort of material, transitory stuff. Right? So I just think there's a distinction between you're a bad person and you're not living up to what you're not focusing on what you should be focusing on, if that makes sense. At least that's what I take from it. Yes, Alan. Janis Joplin, oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? Has everybody seen Beautiful, by the way? Everybody's raving about it. Someone take me. Okay. Sorry, you were saying. That's, right? And what a profound, thank you for that. What a profound, right? Asking God for it. Right? Not like I don't want to win the lottery. I'm just going to have God give me one. Yeah, nice. How about this notion that in this section that we call worry a character flaw? We haven't deeply discussed that. Is it? Is it a flaw of character? Is it a foible? Is it a... Let's talk about the human condition. Do I have that up here? Oh, look. Ike, you're so prescient. What is the author teaching us about the human condition in this paragraph? Yes. So, a few years ago, I think it was Yom Kippur, maybe Rosh Hashanah, I gave a sermon where I talked about the negativity bias. This is the scientific analysis that because our ancestors used to constantly live in fear of being attacked by animals, of fire, of things that we had absolutely no control of, that we became genetically shifted from early humans, to worry, to sort of go to the negative, right? I agreed. The human condition, we worry. We have legitimate fears. So what's he saying? That this is a flaw of character. Let's try to define it. Yes, Carol. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The character flaw is not worrying, but worrying about yourself only. I think you just sort of summed up the entire text of Orchot Tzadikim, right? Which is like when it speaks about the ways of the righteous, right? The ones who are righteous, the tzaddiks in the world. They constantly goes to, this is what that pious person, this is what those groups do, which is an example of, what are you not doing? Stop doing what you're doing. Do what they're doing. Find what's right and emulate that. Stop being so self-centered, right? Because all the examples are people who are generous, people who teach, people who study, people who pray every day, people who do for God and do for others. Right? I think you're absolutely right. Yes, Alice. Mm-hmm. Agreed. That we've changed and we're constantly learning. And I think that's one of the things that's so interesting just in studying this in depth. You know, we're like 200 pages in out of 700 now or something. It's taken us 2 years. Seeing it through our lens and then trying to see it through their lens and thinking about what's different, right? Thinking about one of the great conversations we had this summer. We were talking about what would we do if our kids stole, right? If we caught our kids stealing. And then we were talking, I remember this conversation so vividly, then we were talking about parents who put those stories on Facebook about their kids who stole. And just the impact of that in our society, and just like where's the virtue, where's the ethic, like what's right, it was